Welcome to the Mantis Cave, a podcast for warriors, thinkers, and seekers. Here, we dive into the art of mastery, the philosophy of movement, and the stories that shape us. In this episode, Sifu Hughes takes a deep dive into the origins of the Iron Mantis martial arts system.
Why Kung Fu? So, for me, I had already been training martial arts for 17 years, and early 70s, I started Kaji Kembo, and then around 1980, I got into Hapkido, and then Kuksu 1, and then later in the late 80s, I got into another martial art. It was kind of a mix of things. It was more Chinese martial arts mixed. And, all through the 80s, I was fighting in karate tournaments, and I just knew that there was something else out there. And I had already envisioned it, and I already was even doing some of the practice that I hadn't been taught, but it just made sense to me. And then in January 92, I met Sifu Raymond Fogg, and got introduced to a traditional style of Kung Fu, and that was it. I was hooked. I fell in love with it. He met up with one of his students in college in East Texas, and I saw him walking around. He had some Kung Fu shoes on, and I noticed that, and I just made a comment, and he said he trained martial arts. And I was like, oh, great. And then he said he trained Kung Fu, and I said, interesting. And then he told me about where the school was. It's about 45 minutes away. And I believe the next day I went to visit the school, and that's where I met Raymond Fogg. And at that time, I was already training at another school. So then I started training at both schools for a while. When I started training with Sifu Fogg in the Praying Mantis style, I could just tell there was a little more tradition that was been stuff that had been handed down, forms and drills and stuff, and that really attracted me, the traditional side of it. The teachers that I've learned from were just so good. They were just, a little bit better than most of the other martial arts that I came around, and I was just so impressed by their skills. And one thing that I realized was those gentlemen who had come from a lineage, I just felt like their skills were just so much higher. And then I'm also, in college, my minor was history in government. So I've always been fascinated by the stories that are in traditional systems. Like, we have a lineage that goes back 400 years. It can be traced back, just like my students learned from me. And now they have students, and I can track, my teacher and then where he learned from, and so on and so on. And understanding that these people before me just put in the hard work, and because of that, they were able to pass it down. So yes, all of us figure things out, and we, add little things, or we may, subtract some things. But there's like a recipe that's handed down that's been proven to work. So the most of the system, you don't have to figure out a lot of things, So when I say figure out things, you may have to figure out how to make it work for yourself, but it's still like a drill's been handed down, a technique's been handed down, and these are high percentage moves. Which that's another thing I'm very much into and study is, things that work. And the system that I learned, 7-Star Praying Mantis, is just known to produce good fighters. Not all martial artists are really good fighters. Some are good at forms. Some are good at just showing up and being an athlete, and some are good at supporting others and helping with kids. And then there's some that are just excel in the fighting. And that's something I've always been interested in. And like in the old days, that was very common, but nowadays it's even not that as common, because a lot of people go to schools, they show up, but they're not sparring or fighting all the time. And the thing about the Mantis style is it's so much mixed. Like I say, it's combined with wrestling, trapping. So anyone knows like folk wrestling. I compare Mantis to folk wrestling with strikes. So it's a very powerful moving forward, uh, grabbing, plucking, pushing system set up for takedowns and getting in close and for knockouts. Basically, it's either get in close, knock someone out, or take them down, and it's done uh, with speed. So there's very much a focus on finishing quick. Just like in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools, they're known to roll every class. It was the same way in karate and kung fu. You sparred, every day at the end of class at some capacity. And like most schools, things escalate, and that's what makes you better. It kind of it kind of runs downhill, the beatings and the learning. It also helps the learning curve. After a while, you just get tired of getting beat up and you start figuring things out. Every time we tested, or there was somebody testing in the school, we pretty much, let's say I'm a white belt, I'm going for a yellow belt, the teacher would line up, this is in Hapkido, would line up every student, and you would fight every student for a certain amount of time. And it was pretty rough. Yeah, it was tough. It was like you get hurt, you just get back up, and deal with it. There was no quitting, there was no stopping. And everyone who was there wanted to be there. That was that was a big difference, is people, something inside of them wanted to be there, and they were willing to work that hard and suffer for a greater cause. And that greater cause is inside people. I think many of us who already become fighters and have a good, pretty good martial artists, then we run into Kung Fu and we feel like a beginner all over again. I think that's kind of a draw, knowing that there's so much more to learn. The training was just, it was just a little different. The forms were a little different. They were a little more graceful. I enjoyed watching them. And a lot of the fighting was emphasized on no gear, so it kind of made sense for like self-defense, street. Although I love sparring with pads and gear and everything, in the Kung Fu there was no gear. We didn't have any mats to train on. It was hardwood floors, and I just fell in love with the art itself, not just the fighting, but the art of it. Started learning martial arts. I just did it for myself. I never planned on being a teacher. It wasn't until I moved to Austin, Texas in 95 to keep on with my education, because I was going into medicine. I was told to teach. And so from there I started teaching, and then I ran into a lot of other people who liked it too. And then next thing you find yourself, teaching the same way your teachers taught, and you're handing down the same stories. It's a very natural, organic way to pass on what you learn. And then, like I say, then along the way, students have a lot of questions. You got to figure out how to make things work for them. So that also helps the teacher become a better martial artist. In our lineage too, there's just a lot of stories, and they're nice stories. And just like if you want anyone who cares for history, you actually know that these people existed, and just like they put in the work, they handed it down. You're putting in the work. And also, this style of 7-star praying mantis, when it was created, it was a mixture of the 17 of the best. The story is 17 of the best styles at the time, and then also movements from the praying mantis. So, I like that idea of always trying to find any weaknesses or holes within the system. Not always just a system, but within yourself, because everyone can learn praying mantis system, have it in the same lineage, but everyone's going to do it a little different. And so my mindset, since it was always focused on fighting, if there was any holes or they say weaknesses that I ran across, I would tried to fix that. But I always went back to my teacher to try to better understand. The 7-star praying mantis system is known to be a very close range system, like Wing Chun and like, wrestling. Everyone's the goal is to get in close and do your work. So there wasn't a whole lot of like long range or outer range fighting techniques. And then also once someone went to the ground, if the person wasn't knocked out or they pulled you down and the fight was still continuing, there was a lot of times there wasn't a lot of answers for those questions. So I started realizing because I fought for so many years before I got into Kung Fu. So when I got into Kung Fu, I just dove all in. And then after years of teaching, I had students who wanted to start competing in Sandan, also MMA. And luckily, before that happened, my interest of wanting to better my striking, I just realized that a lot of people who train traditional Kung Fu, it doesn't mean that they could throw a proper jab, cross, hook, uppercut. That they're able to throw high percentage kicks or high percentage takedowns and have takedown defense at a high level. Or if they end up on the ground, do they have an answer? So I started noticing, because I started getting myself around, because I've always been around other martial arts and fighters and whatnot. And as the MMA world grew, I was being exposed to more people like that. And so then I started realizing, and actually it was some of my Kung Fu uncles and Kung Fu family that are in the family, in our lineage, that had also gone through this and started perfecting different aspects of the fighting, what I call offense without bridging. So it's like, I say all the time, you get knocked out before you ever get to use trapping hands or or a takedown. Okay. And then what if, your trapping hands don't work and next thing you know, you're on the ground? Can you defend it? So there were some areas that were not as strong as others. And I started working on those. One of my Kung Fu uncles recommended that I visit with John Hackleman because he was teaching Hawaiian Kempo. So, and he had a very similar mindset as me. So I went out and started training with him. And he was also producing a lot of UFC fighters. And then we ran a family-run dojo too. Same type of that I was. It was just he was more of a karate style, I was more of a Kung Fu style. So it was a good mesh. And that's where I really fine-tuned and honed in what you would say, self-defense, MMA type of fighting. I wouldn't say just MMA, but striking. This is a well-rounded system. Probably one of the best systems I've ever run across as far as a martial art is Hawaiian. Yeah, curriculum, probably the best. That's why it's a big part of what I teach still to this day. And it wasn't when I was training with him, I felt I was picking up pretty good and understanding pretty well because I went back and I'd go out to California and train with him, come back to Austin, fine tune and train it. But I noticed I was having a hard time grasping the Brazilian jiu-jitsu aspect of the training. All the striking stuff and the wrestling stuff I seemed to understand and picked up quick. Brazilian jiu-jitsu I did not pick up as quick. And so then I started training Brazilian jiu-jitsu traditionally with the gi, some no-gi. Most of the no-gi stuff we always did it with strikes, with NHB gloves. So then that started helping fine-tune my Hawaiian Kempo. And then I fell in love with the art of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And there you go. So also trained wrestling with Kenny Johnson. He has a bolt wrestling program. It's a Dan Gable lineage, but he's an Olympic hopeful as well. So I've been fortunate to train with the best in the world in their field. So the wrestling, Kenny Johnson really helped me better understand my wrestling. I would say that as far as fighting goes, Hawaiian Kempo is like the framework. Okay. So, setting up your strikes, your kicks, your takedowns. And then, but once you start making contact, we say, you start bridging with your opponent. That's where a lot of the trapping hands and chi sao and Mantis techniques can help, is that middle to close range. And then, of course, once you get down on the ground, that's where the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu takes over. And the system of Iron Mask, I've been able to like smoothly merge all those from one to another, seamless. So that's enabled me to have success with combining the systems, and that's not always that easy. I've had a lot of other teachers tell me that's something that they've struggled with, is having a seamless system, taking different systems and being able to merge them together. A lot of it has to do with the other teachers. They have the same mindset as me. So really, they made it easier for me to be able to do it, because this got with the right people with the right mindset. Everyone has their own ways. It's just a lot of people aren't training with the specific mindset of fighting and actually getting out on the floor. Just like in BJJ, you're always on the floor rolling. Well, you need to be doing the same thing in your stand-up. And the thing is, what's nice is, just like BJJ has a way to practice, it's rolling. It's not a fight. It's it's like sparring. It's not even, it's not a real fight, but it's a way to keep it real as possible. Well, in our system, we have what's called playing hands, and it's a way that we keep it as real as possible. Just like the BJJ rolling does, but you could do it without, destroying your opponent. So there's it's all in the training methods too, because there's a lot of people who do forms and let's say trapping hands or hand drills, but they're unable to bridge it into their fighting. They may train different, kung fu styles, and like you have different animal styles or this, that, and they train their forms a certain way. But then when they go to fight, they're not always able to use their system. And those who can do that are very effective, because, everything is based on tradition. Like, even, if you look at MMA, it was a mixture of many different arts: boxing, Muay Thai, karate. There were some, a few kung fu guys, BJJ, catch wrestling, sambo. So those are like more traditional styles, because they've been around for a while. Yeah, and that's another area that I like too, because we have forms, and these forms are great exercise. We have classical weapons, great exercise. People want to pick up kettlebells, they want to run and jog and do all these different exercises, and that's great, but we have, we like to say our forms, to this, let me say this: forms to a beginner is just exercises. But if you're a really good fighter, forms can help you, pick up some other little techniques, just the little things in between. So it all depends on what you're doing it for. Some of the weapons we do, class weapons, are heavy, some are light, some are with both hands. We do a lot of what's called chi sao drills, which is sensitivity drills. It's just good for movement. Because it's a traditional system, and we have stuff like what's called qigong and tai chi and yoga within the system, meditation and whatnot. We have these other exercises that help people heal up. Even the elderly can join. I've had students in their 70s that got much stronger from training. We've had young kids train and become really good, mentally and physically. They've improved themselves. Their skills have gotten higher. So there's been benefits from the kids all the way up until the elderly. And that's because our emphasis is not just on fighting. My emphasis has always been on that. And those who want to learn it, of course, I'm going to teach that. To the kids that want to do more sparring, they could do that's there for them. But I also have people who have old students, new students that have come in with injuries. And so I need to know how to help them get healthier without making their injuries worse, try to get their health better. So what I have found is I've run across a lot of styles, other martial martial artists who train styles that were very hard in nature. And when they train Iron Mantis, they're able to get some of the softer sides of it. I've had people who were mainly stand-up fighters, martial artists, stand-up striking, punching, kicking, like kickboxing, whatnot. And I'm able to help them. Iron Man is able to help them learn takedowns and takedown defense, and maybe even add some ground into the program. And like I say, they also can get into the Tai Chi and Qigong, which is a great way to just kind of like help rehab yourself, keep the movement going, and learn some other skills. I never planned on putting all this together. It was literally after teaching for 20 years in a school, a format where I had a lot of students. It was like my laboratory, and it slowly, just organically built itself. So it's a very natural, very honest system. And I, like I say, I was able to bring in the right people and train with the right people. So it just naturally grew into what it is. And then it became what we know as Iron Mantis system. Now, because we are in the 7-star praying mantis lineage, but because I've added Hawaiian Kempo and BJJ and the sports performance training, we did give it recognize it as Iron Mantis. But I will have to say it's been a very natural, organic way of building this system. So it's honest in many ways, and the benefits I've seen from teaching for as long as I have, and being able to like put things together and then test it and then see if does it actually work. Because it's one thing to have an idea and then you put something together, it makes sense, but does it work on the floor? Does it work in competitions? Does it work in people's lives? And it has. So I feel I'm very pleased with it, very, very happy with it. If people have not trained in the past, if they're just learning from the videos, they're going to get a lot out of it. But people who have trained some in the past or a lot, they're going to get even more out of it because they're going to be able to understand the basics. They're going to understand what's going on. And especially if they're able to find a training partner to practice with, because there's a lot of stuff we do solo, but there's lots of stuff we'd also do with partner drills. But definitely, I feel, a beginner, a black belt in a system, a teacher in another system is going to find something that should help them in the online training program.
That's it for today's episode, and thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media, have questions, suggestions, or just want to share your thoughts. Drop us a message or send an email. And remember, mastery is not found in perfection, but in the constant evolution of mind, body, and spirit. Keep evolving, stay inspired, and we'll see you next time.